Good evening. This is John Milburn for Property Development, which is PROP13001 for Central Queensland University. We're in Week 10, Term 1, 2018. We are now very close to the end. We're dealing with the material in Chapter 10 of your text, which relates to marketing and sales. But before we do that, I want to talk at some length in relation to the assessment and also the examination. So firstly, this is feedback territory. You would have noticed the big red button at the top left-hand side of the Moodle page. It is important that you have your say. It's certainly important by way of general feedback. It's important for the university, and it's certainly important for me. So please have your say, click on the red button, complete the survey questions, and the survey won't stay open all the time, so there's a limited time, so please do that as soon as possible. Right, so let's have a look at the assessment feedback. I've provided you with individualised feedback. I've also provided you with an idea of the marks that you received and the averages for the class in relation to both parts of the assessment. The second part relates to a case review, and the idea of that second part of the assessment was for you to critically analyse the case in the context of property development. In a way, what we're looking there is at the end of the process when we're well advanced and we strike problems. And those problems involve going to the Planning and Environment Court, as it was in that case, and arguing matters. What you've probably noticed, which is very important, is the value of having good expert evidence and having a good argument. So you need to build in the contingency of having a litigation at the commencement of your property development process and have a game plan sorted. One of the critical things about the Planning and Environment Court litigation is that the process is very quick. And once you find that you are in a position to contest the conditions that might be imposed, for example, by the assessment manager, you need to be in a position to both lodge your application, seeking a review, and follow up with directions which come on very quickly. So have a look at the practice directions in that regard if you want to go further. So that was the second part. The first part was the more important part in many ways, and it was your toolkit. And throughout this unit, I've emphasised the importance of having something that you can take away with you and actually use in the property development process. Or if you're advising people involved in property development, to have something that will take you to the sources of information that you need quickly. You see, when it comes to practice, you need to do much more than be in a position to write effectively an essay. People aren't interested in paying you to provide a summary or a critique or some sort of general analysis. In short, they want answers. And in order to provide the answers, you need to have a process sorted, and you need to supplement that process with links to valuable information, things that make sense to you. So the idea of the toolkit is that you now keep it and you build on it. It's meant to be a work in progress. It's a living document, as it were. So keep in mind that as you recover information, you should add to that toolkit, supplement it, and make it very much your own. In terms of the assessment, what I was looking for is your ability to consider the objectives of that task and demonstrate an interesting and an original approach to the ideas and processes contained within that task. It was a toolkit. It wasn't a request for a summary. And the idea of having the 7 steps was for you to work out in your own mind, what are the 7 steps? I mean, that was an arbitrary figure. I could have made it 12. But what are the 7 steps and how do you place them in order? Now, it's not always possible to be completely sequential about this, and some of the best papers identified that fact. But you need to have the steps so that you're starting the process of thinking. The idea is that it's practical. So what do? You look at a parcel of land, perhaps, and do you go and buy it? Is that the first step? Probably not. So what is the first step if buying the land is not the first step? Many of you looked at this in terms of exploring multiple options, multiple processes, and you displayed a mastery of the process. What I was looking for is a clear understanding of how different aspects of property development connect and whether you're able to analyse that process and have a clear understanding of different aspects of property development. And just a thanks to Ellen for joining us tonight. If you have any questions about this or anything else, Ellen, please feel free to unmute and ask the questions. All right, so I was looking for someone who could identify and consider the legislative requirements, because this is not done in a vacuum. You need to consider the legislation, what is the appropriate legislation, how does it fit into the process, and within that context, be in a position to demonstrate your problem-solving skills. And that means, in some ways, considering what are the risks associated with property development, how can you minimise the risk? And that's been a theme throughout this course, talking about risk and providing some analysis of how to identify it, how to deal with it in certain circumstances. And that was something that I was looking for very much in your first assessment. With a paper that's of some length, I think it's appropriate to consider having a table of contents. Some of the better papers demonstrated that. It wasn't mandatory, it wasn't an absolute requirement, but some of the papers that were really well set out did have a nice cover sheet, did have a table of contents, and used footnote referencing and hyperlinks throughout the process. So the best answers looked at the question that was asked of them, and that was to develop a document within the context of the example that I used. Now, I could have used any example. I could have said, property development for an abattoir, or property development for a flatland subdivision, or property development for a retirement village, whatever it might have been. I just happened to choose a scenario which you could work around, which was a small 3-storey mixed-use development, retail shops on the ground floor, residential units above. It's the sort of thing that we see in urban development quite often now, both in the context of cities or even larger regional towns, and certainly in the context of, say, beach resorts or a holiday destination. So a lot of applications for this particular scenario. The best answers dealt with that specific scenario very well. The ordinary answers almost didn't touch it, almost provided me with a summary sheet, which was largely from the text, without referring back to the scenario that I wanted you to consider, and that is, how would you go about this process? The very best answers, I think, even identified some of them actually identified a particular property and said, look, for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to consider this property at this price and worked around it. And by working around it, I mean not only developing the 7 steps, but providing some very detailed cash flow projections, referring me to costings such as to websites of quantity surveyors. I was surprised actually that there was very few people that referred me to ongoing newsletter material that's available through quantity surveyors and valuers. So a lot of the material from valuers would have been extremely useful for the purpose of this exercise. So what I was looking for you to was guide me through the process of preparing the development proposal. It was not a proposal itself, but it was something that puts everything together in a useful manner. So we're looking at risk, timing, costings, legislative issues, financing, and telling me how you would put that together within the context of that scenario. So one thing that was fairly common was a desire to refer to consultants. So many people identified that this is not something you would expect to do on your own. You would normally expect to have a number of consultants that will assist you in that process. Now, at a basic level, you could say, well, these are the consultants that I think I'd need. Architect, town planner, quantity surveyor, engineer, lawyer, accountant, etc., etc. But more sophisticated answers went beyond that. and, for example, might have included a table to cross-reference the consultant with the task, the timing, the likely cost, the basis upon which that consultant is likely to charge, and how you might then translate that information into a cash flow projection. So the sophisticated answers really provided me with a lot of that type of material. And then within the context of talking about those consultants, tried to build it in as part of the strategy. And let's take an example. So we have many people identified the need to have surveyors. Some identified the need to have soil testers, but whatever it was, suitably qualified people to consider certain aspects of the property development. Now, of course, whilst we're used to saying, the location is important, that's very, it's very critical in terms of the actual land. Hi, Monica. Thanks for joining us. We're just talking about the assessment and providing some feedback. So in the context of the experts, it was important that you identified the need for surveyors in quantities and soil testers to consider the actual land upon which the development might be built. You remember that example in your text, it was 8.7. The property developer failed to complete an important step and then found that the 49 completed units could not be sold because there had been not proper investigations undertaken in relation to soil testing. Such a basic thing. It was a contaminated site. So kudos for those of you who identified the need to ensure that the site was not contaminated and that the survey and the other soil testing was appropriate. But then it's a question of, that's all very well to identify that, and that's great, but then take it one step further. How are you actually going to gain access to the land for this survey and the soil test to be undertaken? Would you ask permission before you signed a contract by way of an expression of interest and said, well, look, I'm not in a position to offer you anything until I've done these basic tests, and you're going to have to give me access to the site if you want me to consider making an offer to purchase your property? Is that the way you approach it? Or would you approach it on the basis that you would sign a contract and have a condition of that contract that these experts be able to access the property in order to obtain the appropriate tests? Or would you sign an option to purchase the land, negotiating a formal license to enter the land at that time? So different ways of approaching it. What I was looking for is, what is your approach? What is the way that you would expect to embark on this process early on? So it was a layered situation. So the people that got the best answers, the best marks, were those that were able to successfully layer this and, very importantly, bring in real life context. I mean, some people went so far as to say, and I really like this, if I'm doing the property development and I need to undertake a survey, here's the consultant I'd likely use, and here's a link to that consultant's web address, and here's how the costing of it will work, and here's how I can now build that into my cash flow projections. So can you see how it's layered? The really sophisticated answers provided that level of insight and depth. I mean, and it went beyond that. So, for example, if we're talking about acquiring the property, many of you identified, probably from things that I'd said during the unit, that it is important to understand the entity that purchases the property. It's too late to purchase it in your name, and then after you've signed the contract, have your accountant say, no, you should have funded it in this manner using superannuation or using a company or a trust or a partnership. You've got to sort that out before you sign the contract, otherwise you're up for potentially double transfer duty. We used to call it stamp duty, we call it transfer duty now. So these are important, practical things that you need to consider. Some people said, well, here's the accountant or the lawyer that I might use, and that's all very good. So I was looking for something which went beyond a summary, something that went beyond a mere statement of principle. I mean, anyone could say, if I'm going to do a property development, here are my 7 steps. I'm going to buy some land, I'm going to engage someone to build it, I'm going to get some finance for it, I'm then going to get an agent to sell it, etc., etc. That's all very basic and easy. but give me the actual detail. Give me the costs. Give me the people that you would engage to do it. That's the sort of thing. Now, some people found some very good online resources. I mean, one, for example, is Michael Yardley has a property update. It's a useful website. So have a look at that. It's called propertyupdate.com.au. I mean, maybe even develop your own website on how to do these things. Then, of course, there was the issue of selling the property development, and really advanced answers went into this sort of detail. They would say, okay, I've got a mixed-use development, I've got commercial on the bottom, and I've got retail up the front, at the top. And residential at the top. How am I actually going to market that? How am I going to sell it? And you might have thought that a property investor is likely to buy the commercial space because of the rental income, or it might be an owner-operator who buys the income. So why not release that now to get a tenant involved? And if you're lucky enough, you might have even got a tenant who wants to buy the freehold. But maybe by having a tenant in place at the moment that you can release it lawfully for sale, an investor is more interested because they can say, well, I'll get income from this immediately. I don't have to go and find a tenant. But if you do find the tenant, how are you going to provide them with a proper incentive to purchase? Are you going to provide them with rent-free period? Are you going to provide them with a fit-out contribution? How are you going to commit them to actually proceeding, even though you can't offer to lawfully have them occupy the premises because you're doing this in advance? So an agreement to lease might be the way to go. So the whole range of different practical things that you could have done. And within that context, I was also looking for presentation. I was looking at the way in which you explained yourself, the language, the presentation, all of those things that are important. Now, I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but Ellen or Monica, do you have any questions about the assessment? Do you have any questions about my feedback or the way in which it was marked? If you have a question, if something on your mind, others might have the same thing. Yes, Monica.
I'm just want to apologise for being late, and I'm also having just a bit of trouble hearing. I don't know if it's my mic. So yeah, excuse me if but I think it must be. But yeah, no questions as yet.
Okay, thanks, Monica. And look, I'm using a different form of microphone tonight, so hopefully it's coming through reasonably clearly, but thank you for that. Ellen, do you have any questions, comments?
No, I haven't had a good chance to look through my feedback yet, but yeah, when I do, if I have a question, I'll post it on UCrew.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. You know the routine. And thank you for for those of you that are using UCrew. I think UCrew is now going to become a very valuable resource as we prepare for the examination. So let's talk about this examination. We'll be talking about the exam each week now until the exam to some degree. So I'll try and identify different parts of exam preparation. But the first thing that I want to mention is that when it comes to preparing for an exam, you need to understand that examiners have different ways of starting a question. Now, that might seem really odd, and you might think, what do I mean? But look at the first word, because often that will give you an immediate idea as to what the examiner seeks. Now, it may not be the case in this unit, but I want to run through 6 different words. One of them is a hyphenated word, but 6 different words that give you an idea as to what it is that the examiner wants you to say in your answer. So the first word is interpretation. If the examiner says interpret something, what do you think the examiner is really asking you to do? Interpretation means determining the material facts. No, that's number 1. Number 2, an analysis. If the examiner says, analyze this, What are they really looking for? The answer is yes, Ellen?
Looking at the bigger picture.
Yes, that's very good. Looking at the bigger picture. Yep. And I would have thought also identifying hidden features, which is part of that looking at the bigger picture. So if you're analysing something, you're not just summarising it, you're not determining the material facts. As Ellen quite rightly said, you're looking at the big picture, and part of it is, hey, what's missing here? So in your property development assessment, I was really looking for that as well. You know, what are the things that are hidden? And that's important. So when you're analysing, you're looking at the big picture, you're looking for hidden features. Right, what if your examination starts with the word evaluate? When the examiner asks for an evaluation, what's he or she looking for? What's evaluate? All right, it's an assessment. You're assessing. If you're evaluating something, you're assessing it, aren't you? So what you're saying is, here are the good things, here are the bad things, but I'm assessing this. So when I provide feedback to an assessment, I'm evaluating, aren't I? To some degree, I'm analysing and interpreting, but really evaluation means ability to assess. That's number 3. Number 4 is inference. So if the examiner says, from these facts, infer something, if I ask you to infer something or draw an inference, what am I asking you to do? I'm asking you to draw a conclusion. I'm looking for a conclusion here. I'm looking for an answer. So what is the inference that you can, what inference do you draw from this situation? Well, what's your conclusion? Give me a conclusion. That's number 4. Number 5 is explanation. Explanation is fairly straightforward. If the examiner says, explain this, well, we're looking for your ability to communicate results. Explaining is almost self-explanatory. That's a terrible way of describing, but I think you know what I mean. So I'm looking for your ability to communicate results. And the 6th one is pretty rare, but self-regulation. If you're asked about self-regulation, it's your ability to apply other skills to your own thinking. In some ways, the first assessment was about self-regulation. Okay, so that's some general examination technique guidelines. But let's talk about property 13001, examination. The first thing is that the university encourages me to encourage you to access your own personal exam schedules in your My Centre. Now, Monica, are you familiar with My Centre? I mean, I don't have one because I'm not a student.
My Centre, no.
No, okay. And look, that's what I think it's called, but there should be a website, a web link. So www.cqu.edu/student-life/new-students/exams and timetables. I'll provide you with that link, and I'd ask if you could be kind enough to just check on that. Is there any questions about that, Monica?
No.
Okay.
That's good.
Thank you. All right. So now, while we think that while I'm given information about the examination, I'm generally told not to disclose that and get everyone to go and check their own information. But I will if you promise to keep it quiet, just between us, and I mean all of the property 13001 people. I believe that your examination is scheduled for Tuesday, the 12th of June at 9 a.m. Tuesday, the 12th of June, 9 a.m. Monica, Ellen, have you come across that information elsewhere? Or is it me telling you for the first time?
No, I haven't. I've been trying to access the My Centre part through CQU for a few weeks now about exams, but it keeps coming up with an error. So whether nothing's been released yet, I'm unsure.
Yes, and the information is released very late, so that might be information that's been made available to me and not the students yet. But I will ask this favour of either of the two of you or others in the class, if you do have some success in identifying how to access your information, please share that with the class with a note in UCrew. All right, so and remember, of course, that it is your personal exam schedule that you must follow instead of anything that I might tell you in general terms. It is possible for you to change the exam venue, but you need to apply for that, and the process of changing the exam centre is outlined in the Assessment Policy and Procedures, available at www.cqu.edu.au/policy. Otherwise, you need to be aware that on the, well, I'm pretty sure it's Tuesday the 12th of June at 9 AM, you will need to be at an invigilated examination centre. This is not a take-home paper. This is not something you do over the internet. It's old-fashioned, it's old school. You need to turn up at an exam centre. An invigilator will be there to greet you. You register to say, I'm here, have your ID, be there at least half an hour before the due date, at least of the due time. You'll have 15 minutes to read the paper, and you'll have 2 hours to complete the paper. Now, the exam date is not flexible unless you have made an application to change the centre. It will be on a day, at a time, at a place, which is prescribed. The date and time we can't change. That's what it is. It is what it is. But you might be able to change the date, the place, that's all. So the duration, 2 hours plus 15 minutes reading time. It is open book. Now, open book means everything except access to the internet, but you can take in whatever you like. You can take in as many materials as you like, as far as I'm concerned. Take in your textbook for sure. Take in other reference material, and this is really important, take in your own notes. Because I'm going to encourage you to prepare model answers to questions that you believe might be part of the examination. Now you might say, how on earth do I prepare something when I don't know what the question is? We'll talk about what the questions might be and how to go about doing that. But as a starting point, I encourage you to prepare for what I call Level 3 standard, that's my terminology, exam preparation. So there's a video which I've posted on the front page of Moodle. It's also tucked away in part of the examination assessment material, and it's called Level 3 Examination and Online Paper Preparation. Have a look at that and you'll get a better idea of what I mean. Either of you looked at that video yet? No? Great. So the exam itself comprises 8 questions. 8 questions you need to answer, 2 hours to answer it, and here's the bad news, you have to answer all 8 questions. There's no choice, no take this one or that one, it's all 8. Now questions 1 and 2 are worth 7 marks each. Questions 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 and 8 are worth 6 marks each. So 1 and 2 are just slightly more involved than the others, but it's basically every question is much the same. And every question requires you to answer in an essay-style response. And when it's an essay-style response, it's kind of theoretical, but as you probably, it will come as no surprise, given the way in which I've tried to approach this unit, that will be within the parameters of practical application. So there will be a practical flavour, but it's essentially an essay-style response. And because there's 8 questions, you can almost guarantee that there won't be a duplication of questions around weekly topics. For example, if there is one question in the examination that deals with marketing and sales, you can almost guarantee there won't be a second question that relates to marketing and sales. So there's 12 weeks, 11 substantive topics. I probably won't ask you anything out of week 12 material, probably, I might. But you can guarantee that there's likely to be something out of each of the, 8 out of, say, 11 topics will be covered. some topics won't be part of the examination. However, that doesn't mean if you think that the question relates to marketing and sales, don't think that you must restrict yourself to material in week 10 content. If you think that something out of week 2, it works well with providing the answer, then bring it in. So I'm looking for you to be inventive as much as you can. So when it comes to writing the answer, don't spend time rewriting the question. You might do that when you've got a take-home paper and plenty of time. You might do that in an assessment, but in the exam, don't rewrite the question. You can just get straight into the writing the answer. You don't have much time. When you write your answer to the question in the examination, do try to write clearly if you can. A good technique is using headings or subheadings. That shows that you've actually got a clear thought process. What you don't want to do is have a rambling answer. So if you have headings and subheadings, firstly, it guides me. I know where you're going at a glance, and it shows me that you've really thought about this. So that's an ideal situation. But do try to write using sentences. You can use dot points if you have to, but try to avoid that if possible. But sometimes it is the best way of proceeding. You're probably of the belief now that I'm reasonably formal in my approach. I mean, I present with a suit tie, and I do like academic writing. So that's more than that which you would use in everyday speech. So what it means is, I'd prefer you didn't use slang. I'd prefer if you avoided contractions. For example, do not use won't if you can use will not. Do not use don't if you can use do not, even in an examination context. So watch your spelling, your grammar, your punctuation, all of those things I think are important. And if you can maintain that degree of good writing in an examination, to me that shows that you're better prepared, you're composed, you're not panicking. So do try to stay composed during your examination. It's important that you take a moment to analyse the question or the topic and make sure that you understand what I'm asking of you, which is going back to that first part that we talked about, whether it's interpretation, explanation, analysing, etc. So do try to use complete sentences. And as a guide, use short sentences. Short sentences can be very effective, and it can avoid a situation where you become rambling and lost in your own sentences. So many students do want to just add a little bit more to a sentence to the point where sometimes it goes on for far too long. General guide, and this comes from the Great Guide to University Study, topic 5, aim for less than 30 words per sentence, sometimes much less than that. An effective sentence might be 5 words. Now, as a technique, make effective use of your time. Time will go very quickly, so read the whole exam and allocate appropriate time and answer each of those questions well within that context. Okay, we will talk more about exam technique and preparation later, but I'll leave you with this thought for the moment. As you're now preparing for your examination in earnest, what I would like you to do is work your way through each of the weekly problems. You can share that information or you can prepare it for yourself, but that will give you an excellent guide as to what you should be doing for the preparation for the examination and have your answers for those weekly problems laid out in a way that makes sense to you. Well, I know I'm doing a lot of talking. Monica, Ellen, do you have any questions?
I'm going to be cheeky and ask for any more, ask for more specific hints as to what we should be guided to look over more than the rest, if that makes sense. I know you've touched base on it, but I'm going to be cheeky and just kind of poke the bear and ask for a bit more.
No, that's good. No, that's good. I don't mind you being cheeky with it. All right, so the first thing is that the examination will cover the entire unit. So there's just as much chance that the question might come from week 1 as from week 11. So it will cover the full ambit. Now that doesn't help you at all, Ellen, does it? That's not what you wanted at all. You wanted something more specific. Look, I'm going to leave you with, and that is work your way through the weekly problem, not necessarily in a block, but maybe, I don't know, maybe adopt this technique. Go to question number 1 in week 1, answer it well, then go to question number 1 in week 2, answer it well, and so on. But I would certainly encourage you to have an answer for every one of the weekly problems. I hope that's a good announcement at the start. Does that help, Ellen, or it doesn't help at all?
Yes and no.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm encouraging you to do is a lot of work. Sorry, but not ridiculous amount, but enough to ensure that you really understand the content of the unit. So, but I'll try and give you some more hints as we go. But that's probably as far as I'm willing to go tonight. Sorry, Ella.
No worries. Thank you.
Now, any other questions, Monica? Any questions?
That was perfect. That answered my question. Thanks.
All right. Look, I know that we haven't touched on marketing and sales. Marketing and sales is very important. I would encourage you to read your text, read the study guide. If you haven't already done so, look at my formal lecture, which is really short, so there's no reason why you shouldn't look at that. And importantly, follow the links in the material. So in the textbook, it's a lot of excellent material, but it's perhaps not quite as practically orientated in this area as it might otherwise be. So what I would like you to do is have a look at some information, some links that I've put on the website. One of those is very practical and it talks about advertising. So if you're going to market, that means more than likely you're advertising. If you're advertising, this is the lawyer in me coming out, make sure that you're aware of the Australian consumer law. Even if you just go to the ACCC website, you will find some excellent material about the Australian consumer law. And if you're lawyers, you need to know exactly how to find the Australian consumer law, which is actually a schedule to Competition and Consumer Act legislation. But if you go to the ACCC website, that will give you enough material to get through. And then if part of your plan is to do site boards and local laws, let's get practical. Let's learn how you find out about these local laws. What are the requirements of councils in relation to signage? And I've given you some examples in relation to Brisbane City Council on the website. So follow some of those links and then think about the practical aspects of selling and marketing. Wow, that's a really brief overview of this week's material. But it's more important that we get our head into examination mode now. All right, and please have a look at the feedback I provided in relation to the assessment. And if there's any questions about that, let us know. But ask through you, crew, as the first point of call, generally speaking. And very importantly, as I mentioned, please go to the top left-hand side, click the red button, have your say. Really important, and I thank you very much if you do that. But it's all anonymous, so don't worry. You can be entirely truthful. Okay, well, that's probably all I plan to do tonight. Any questions before I wrap up? All good? Okay. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Monica. Good luck with your exam preparation. If you're watching this as a recorded session, please make sure that you start now for your exam preparation. Any questions, ideally through you, crew. All the best. I'll end the meeting now. See you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. See you next week.